History remembers conquerors and kings. But the most dangerous figures are rarely kings. They are the ones who enter the king's chamber. Across myth, empires, and modern finance, one pattern repeats. A sharp outsider learns the elite code. He becomes useful, he gains access. He embeds inside power, and then he corrupts it. This is not a story of admiration, it is a warning. Intelligence without moral restraint becomes predatory. Access without accountability becomes exploitation. The pattern is ancient, the names change, the wiring does not. In Norse mythology, Loki is not born among the Aesir gods. He is not Thor's equal, he is not Odin's heir. He is outsider, shapeshifter, clever beyond measure. He earns proximity through usefulness. When problems arise, Loki solves them. When danger looms, he improvises. The gods tolerate him because he is useful. But Loki's brilliance is unstable. He manipulates for leverage. He engineers the death of Balder, an act that destabilizes the divine order itself. When his schemes escalate beyond containment, the gods bind him. The divine court survives. The disruptor is restrained. Pattern: an outsider enters the highest chamber, gains trust through skill, weaponizes proximity. Instability rises. Containment follows. This is not heroism, it is corrosive intelligence. Madoff didn't storm Wall Street. He blended in, he built reputation, he was chairman of NASDAQ. He was trusted, his fraud lasted decades. Not because of genius mathematics, but because of elite endorsement. When exposed, he went to prison. Wall Street did not collapse. The individual fell. The structure absorbed. Epstein, the outsider who learned the elite code. Jeffrey Epstein was born in 1953 in Brooklyn, not Manhattan. Not a private island surrounded by security and silence. Brooklyn. He came from a middle-class household. His father worked for the city parks department. His mother was a school aide. There was no inherited wealth, no political dynasty, no family name that unlocked doors in Manhattan's financial towers. But he possessed two qualities that would define his trajectory: intelligence and observation. Intelligence alone does not move someone from Brooklyn into elite rooms. Many intelligent people remain outside those rooms forever. What separated him was observation, the ability to study how power actually functions rather than how it is described in textbooks. Most middle-class narratives teach that advancement comes through ladders: education, credentials, promotions, visible achievement. But elite ecosystems do not operate like ladders. They operate like circles. They are rooms you circulate inside once invited. Epstein grasped that difference early. He did not try to conquer the elite world from outside. He did not campaign for entry. He entered by becoming useful. That distinction matters. Dalton School, the first gate. In the mid-1970s, Epstein became a teacher at the Dalton School in Manhattan, an elite private institution whose students included the children of financiers, executives, and wealthy families embedded in Wall Street culture. To many, that would appear as a modest teaching position. But structurally, it was far more than employment. It was exposure. At Dalton, he was not teaching anonymous children. He was teaching the sons and daughters of people who controlled capital. In doing so, he entered the domestic perimeter of elite households. Trust at that level is intimate. When a family entrusts someone with their child's education, that person crosses into a protected space. In those environments, one observes how wealth behaves when it is not performing for the public. Conversations are quieter. Concerns are private. Power is normalized. Dalton was not simply a classroom. It was an education in elite psychology. This is where the first elite law becomes clear. Access is worth more than credentials. Epstein did not complete a college degree, yet he gained access to families whose names carried financial weight. The absence of formal pedigree mattered less than proximity and perceived competence. Through those social channels, another door opened. Bear Stearns, the language of capital. From Dalton, Epstein moved into Bear Stearns, a major Wall Street firm. There, he encountered not just wealth, but the mechanics of wealth. He learned how capital flows across markets. He observed how risk is structured and restructured. He saw how reputation can stabilize financial trust even when complexity obscures transparency. He also absorbed something deeper about the psychology of the ultra-wealthy. The richest individuals do not crave publicity. They seek insulation. They prefer problems solved quietly. They value advisors who operate discreetly rather than publicly. Discretion beats visibility. This insight shaped his next move. Rather than positioning himself as a public financial star, he began presenting himself as a private operator, someone who would handle sensitive financial matters away from scrutiny. He was not building a public empire. He was cultivating private authority. The patron engine, delegated power. The most decisive shift in his trajectory came through billionaire patronage, particularly his relationship with Leslie Wexner. When Wexner granted Epstein power of attorney in the early 1990s, it represented something rare inside elite systems: delegated authority. Power of attorney meant Epstein could legally act on Wexner's behalf in financial transactions and property decisions. That was not symbolic trust. It was structural trust. With delegated authority, assets could be purchased, transferred, and managed under his direction. High-value properties entered his orbit. Financial leverage expanded. This was the moment when he transitioned from advisor to operator. Delegated power transforms an outsider into an insider. Once someone operates wealth at that scale, legitimacy begins to compound. Others assume safety because someone powerful has already vouched for him. Endorsement becomes legitimacy, and legitimacy inside elite systems does not require public validation. It requires association. The elite persona, becoming the connector. With assets and endorsements secured, Epstein evolved beyond the role of wealth manager. He began cultivating an elite persona, not merely as a financial advisor, but as a connector of worlds. He hosted gatherings at his properties. He funded academic research. He introduced wealthy donors to scientists and intellectuals. He positioned himself as fascinated by complex ideas, genetics, physics, long-term societal questions. In doing so, he created adjacency. He placed himself at the intersection of finance, academia, and politics. In network terms, he became a high-centrality node, a bridge between powerful clusters that otherwise operated separately. Here lies the darker structural truth. In elite ecosystems, individuals rarely ask, "Who are you at your core?" They ask, "Who trusts you?" Once respected figures are photographed alongside you, suspicion weakens. Once institutions accept donations, association becomes normalized. The presence of other elites becomes a form of social proof. The scandal cycle. Containment, escalation, collapse. The fracture did not begin in 2019. It began in 2005. In March of that year, the Palm Beach Police Department received a report from the parents of a 14-year-old girl. She had allegedly been paid $300 to give Jeffrey Epstein a massage at his Palm Beach mansion. The girl described sexual activity during that encounter. She also stated she had been recruited by another teenage girl. Detectives began investigating. What they uncovered was not an isolated incident. They identified multiple teenage girls, many from financially vulnerable backgrounds, who described a similar pattern. Being recruited by friends, brought to Epstein's residence, paid in cash, and sometimes encouraged to recruit others. Palm Beach police compiled evidence suggesting a structured recruitment system. The police chief at the time later stated that detectives had identified dozens of potential victims. The case was referred to federal prosecutors. At this stage, the structure was exposed locally, but not yet nationally. Then came 2008. Instead of a sweeping federal prosecution, Epstein entered a plea agreement in Florida State Court. He pleaded guilty to 2 charges: solicitation of prostitution and procurement of a minor for prostitution. He was sentenced to 18 months in jail, but ultimately served about 13 months. The terms were controversial. He was allowed work release, meaning he left jail for extended hours during the day. He served time in a private wing of the county jail. He registered as a sex offender. But the most consequential element was not the jail time. It was the federal non-prosecution agreement. Federal prosecutors in Miami agreed not to pursue additional federal charges related to the conduct under investigation. The agreement also reportedly included immunity for certain unnamed potential co-conspirators. This is where containment becomes structural. A broader federal case would have required sworn testimony, potentially public trials, discovery processes, and cross-examination. Instead, the case was resolved narrowly. Legally, plea agreements are common. They are part of the justice system. But structurally, this resolution limited exposure. No sweeping federal trial, no extensive public testimony, no expanded circle under oath. The case concluded legally. It did not conclude morally. And here is what shocked many observers. After serving his sentence, Epstein re-entered elite social spaces. Some distanced themselves. Others maintained contact. He attended gatherings. He met academics. He communicated with influential individuals. The network did not collapse. It recalibrated. That recalibration is not mystical. Elite systems are built on compartmentalization. One conviction does not automatically dissolve all associations. Legal closure often provides social insulation. For nearly a decade, the matter remained largely contained. Until 2018. The Miami Herald published a detailed investigative series revisiting the 2008 plea agreement. The reporting reignited national attention. Questions resurfaced about the scope of the earlier investigation and why federal prosecution had not proceeded. Public pressure intensified. In July 2019, federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York arrested Epstein at Teterboro Airport. This time, the charges were federal: sex trafficking of minors and conspiracy. The indictment alleged that between 2002 and 2005, Epstein had abused dozens of underage girls in New York and Florida. It described a recruitment pattern in which minors were paid for sexual acts and encouraged to bring in additional victims. Under federal law, sex trafficking of minors does not require proof of force. The involvement of minors in exchange for compensation meets the threshold. The 2019 charges signaled escalation. Unlike 2008, this case was positioned as a full federal prosecution. A trial would have required witness testimony under oath. Evidence would have been introduced in open court. Defense teams would have cross-examined victims and prosecutors. The potential exposure was wider. Then, on August 10, 2019, Epstein was found unresponsive in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York. The official ruling by the New York City medical examiner was suicide by hanging. Subsequent investigations revealed serious procedural failures at the jail. Correctional officers failed to perform required checks. Staffing shortages were documented. Monitoring procedures broke down. 2 guards were later charged with falsifying records, though those charges were resolved through deferred prosecution agreements. The trial ended before it began. No cross-examination, no courtroom testimony, no full evidentiary unfolding. The central defendant was gone. In 2021, Ghislaine Maxwell, a longtime associate, was convicted in federal court of conspiracy to entice minors and sex trafficking of minors. Prosecutors argued she played a role in recruiting and grooming underage girls for Epstein. Her conviction confirmed that the operation involved more than one individual. It established a recruitment structure in court. But beyond Epstein and Maxwell, no broader elite conspiracy was proven through criminal convictions. That distinction matters. The public narrative often leaps beyond court-established facts. The legal record remains narrower. And then something historically familiar occurred. Institutions moved to protect continuity. Universities reviewed and in some cases returned donations. Financial institutions reassessed relationships. Public figures issued statements distancing themselves. Reputation management activated. Legal teams tightened language. Organizations emphasized due process and separation. The shock was absorbed. The individual collapsed. The network adapted. This is not proof of conspiracy. It is evidence of institutional survival instinct. Across centuries, systems survive scandal by isolating the exposed node. The architecture protects itself through compartmentalization, legal process, reputational recalibration, and continuity planning. The Epstein case demonstrated the modern form of that pattern. A local investigation, a narrow plea agreement, a resurgence of scrutiny, a federal escalation, a sudden death, a secondary conviction, institutional distancing, structural survival. Jeffrey Epstein's story is not a tale of misunderstood genius. It is a documented case of exploitation of minors, prosecuted within legal boundaries and embedded within a broader social ecosystem that proved resilient. The individual collapsed. The system endured, and that endurance, not the scandal itself, is the structural constant that repeats from myth to modernity. This story is not admiration, it is anatomy. Across myth, empire, monarchy, and modern finance, a sharp outsider learns the elite code. He becomes useful, he gains delegated power, he weaponizes proximity, he falls, and the structure survives. From Loki to Sejanus, from Cromwell to Madoff, from palace courts to Manhattan townhouses, scandal tests systems, but systems built on loyalty, discretion, and compartmentalization endure. The lesson is not that power hides, the lesson is that power absorbs, and in elite ecosystems, survival, not virtue, is the ultimate metric of strength. Thank you for watching. Beyond identities, beyond borders, beyond divisions, our destiny is one. You are watching Next Horizon Global.